Emily Carter had always been someone who thrived on order and routine. At 32, she had built a life that many envied for its balance, calm, and quiet purpose. As a civilian doctor in a small hospital in Ohio, she spent her days moving from one patient to the next, her hands steady, her voice soothing, and her mind constantly assessing, calculating, and deciding the best course of action. From delicate surgical procedures to handling emergencies in the AA, Emily had earned a reputation for being composed under pressure, almost unnervingly so. Her colleagues often joked that nothing could rattle her, whether it was a chaotic night in the AA or an unusually complex surgery. But what made Emily truly remarkable wasn't just her skill, it was her unwavering empathy. She remembered the tiniest details about her patients, from a child's favorite cartoon to an elderly man's preferred way of drinking his coffee. For Emily, healing wasn't just about medicine. It was about connecting with people on a human level. That connection extended to her family, too. Her younger brother Jason, 28, was a paramedic, and though they had chosen very different paths, they shared a bond built on mutual respect and a love for helping others. Their father, Harold, often teased Emily about being the serious one in the family, but he also admired her drive and dedication. Her life, while fulfilling, was predictable. Mornings were for hospital rounds, afternoons for surgeries, and evenings for paperwork and patient follow-ups. She lived alone in a modest apartment a short drive from the hospital, her shelves lined with medical textbooks, photos of family, and a few personal mementos. On weekends, she volunteered at local clinics helping those who couldn't afford medical care. Emily didn't seek recognition. She simply found satisfaction in knowing she had made a difference in someone's life. That sense of purpose, however, was about to be tested in ways she could never have imagined. One quiet Thursday evening, Emily was finishing up her paperwork in the hospital when her phone rang. The name on the screen made her heart skip a beat. Jason. It wasn't unusual for him to call, but the tone of his voice immediately signaled that something was wrong. Emily! It's the unit, Jason's voice trembled. They've been ambushed. Some of the medics. They're hurt. We're pinned down. For a moment, Emily froze. She had seen trauma before, but this was different. The words painted a picture of chaos, fear, and danger she had only ever read about in news reports or seen on TV. Her brother, her family, people she cared about were in immediate danger, and she was hundreds of miles away. Her training kicked in. Calmly, she grabbed her medical bag and a notebook, jotting down questions, procedures, anything that might help Jason and his team. Where are you exactly? How many are injured? What supplies do you have? She asked, her voice steady despite the racing thoughts in her mind. She knew that panicking would solve nothing. What was needed now was focus, quick thinking, and courage. Jason hesitated before replying, We're near the northern sector. There are 5 seriously injured medics, Emily. It's bad. We're not going to last long without help. Emily's mind raced. She had no combat experience, no field training. But she did have something just as important, a lifetime of working under extreme pressure, making critical decisions where even a fraction of a second could mean life or death. Her instincts as a doctor, her ability to remain calm and act decisively, were her only tools, but they might be enough. By the time she hung up, Emily had made her decision. She wasn't going to sit safely at home while her brother and his team fought for their lives. She would do whatever she could to help, even if it meant stepping into a world she had never known. A world of bullets, explosions, and danger. For the first time in her life, Emily Carter felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. But alongside it was a steely determination. She would not let fear stop her. As she packed her bag that night, carefully including every piece of medical equipment she might need, she glanced at a family photo on her desk. Jason smiled back at her, unaware that his sister was about to cross the threshold from the controlled world of medicine into a battlefield, where every decision could be the difference between life and death. Emily took a deep breath, her heart pounding, knowing that her ordinary life as a civilian doctor was about to end and something extraordinary was about to begin. Emily Carter's flight to the conflict zone felt surreal. Just hours ago, she had been in the quiet comfort of her apartment, sipping lukewarm coffee and reviewing patient charts. Now she was hurtling thousands of miles away from home toward uncertainty, danger, and chaos. Her hands gripped the armrests of the plane as she tried to process the reality. Her brother Jason, along with an entire medic unit, was under attack, pinned down by enemy forces, and their survival depended on quick, precise action. Emily had never imagined that she, a civilian doctor, could be in a position where lives literally depended on her courage and decision-making. She tried to calm herself by focusing on what she knew best, medicine. Years of emergency surgeries had trained her to respond under pressure, to remain clear-headed while others panicked. But this situation was different. Here, bullets replaced scalpels and the threat was immediate and deadly. Emily reviewed her mental checklist of supplies she had packed: bandages, trauma kits, intravenous fluids, surgical instruments, and portable medical devices. Every item would need to be deployed with precision, and she would have to think quickly about how to stabilize the injured medics until help arrived. As the plane descended, she received a satellite call from Jason. The connection crackled under the stress of their location, but she could hear the fear and exhaustion in his voice. "Emily, they're not just injured," he said, voice tight with urgency. "We're pinned down. The enemy, they're everywhere. We can't hold much longer." Emily's stomach twisted. "Stay calm, Jason. I'm on my way. Tell me who is hurt first and what you've done so far." She guided him step by step, offering instructions over the crackling line: elevate the wounded, apply pressure to major wounds, maintain their airway, and stabilize fractures. Even from hundreds of miles away, her knowledge was a lifeline. She was already thinking ahead. Once she arrived, she'd need to create a safe zone, triage the injured, and coordinate evacuation. Landing in the region was jarring. Dust and smoke filled the air, mingling with the acrid scent of burned vehicles and debris. The sound of distant gunfire and explosions underlined the urgency. Emily could see the soldiers moving in careful patterns as they attempted to secure the area, but the chaos was overwhelming. She was a civilian, completely untrained for combat. Yet the knowledge that her brother's life and the lives of several others hung in the balance left no room for hesitation. The first thing Emily did was locate the nearest medic's safe point. With Jason guiding her over the radio, she found a cluster of wounded and exhausted soldiers attempting to maintain a defensive perimeter. Emily's heart ached at the sight. Medics, people trained to save others, now injured and terrified themselves. She took command quietly, her voice calm but firm, directing them to bring the most severely injured into a temporary triage zone she set up behind what little cover they had. Emily realized something immediately. Medicine alone wouldn't be enough. The enemy's presence was too close, their movement unpredictable. While stabilizing wounds, she was constantly aware of the surrounding danger, scanning for threats and calculating risks. Every decision was a delicate balance between treating injuries and keeping everyone alive in the open, volatile environment. Despite her fear, Emily's instinct for decisive action surged forward. She began improvising solutions, using equipment in unconventional ways to maximize the safety of the medics. She crafted stretchers from available materials, set up makeshift force stations, and communicated with the command unit to request air support. But even as she acted, she realized the truth. Medical expertise would save lives only if the enemy could be temporarily neutralized. She had no weapons training, yet the situation was demanding she consider options she never imagined. Jason looked at her through a haze of exhaustion and panic, silently asking for guidance. Emily's gaze met his, steady and resolute. "We'll get through this," she whispered. It wasn't just encouragement, it was a promise. Emily knew that stepping into this unknown world would challenge everything she had ever believed about herself. Yet she also understood that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's action in spite of it. And in that moment, Emily Carter became more than a civilian doctor. She became the anchor for a unit whose lives were teetering on the edge. Emily Carter stepped off the military transport, and the reality of the situation hit her like a physical force. Dust swirled around her boots, carrying the acrid stench of smoke and gunpowder. The once green landscape was marred by craters, shattered vehicles, and the remnants of buildings reduced to skeletal frames. The distant echoes of gunfire punctuated the chaos, a constant reminder that danger was everywhere. This was nothing like the controlled environment of a hospital. This was a battlefield. Her heart pounded, not just from fear but from adrenaline. Jason's voice still rang in her ears, tense and shaky. She had left her civilian life behind hours ago, trading predictable routines for a world where every decision could mean life or death. Despite having no combat training, she moved forward with determination. Her medical kit slung over her shoulder. Scanning for her brother and the remaining medics, she found them near the ruins of a small outpost, crouched behind a pile of debris, faces streaked with dirt, sweat, and blood. Jason waved weakly, relief flooding his expression as he saw her approach. "Emily, you made it," he whispered, his voice trembling. I didn't think anyone could." He trailed off, too exhausted and terrified to finish the sentence. Emily didn't need him to. She understood the unspoken words. They were surrounded, vulnerable, and running out of time. Emily dropped to her knees and began assessing the wounded. 2 medics had deep gunshot wounds to their legs. One had a punctured lung, and another was in shock from shrapnel injuries. Every move she made was deliberate, calm, and precise. She elevated legs, applied tourniquets, and stabilized vital signs. Her hands moved with surgical precision, yet every glance over her shoulder reminded her that danger was omnipresent. Amid the chaos, she noticed the enemy forces advancing in small, calculated groups. Bullets pinged against the debris, and the faint smell of smoke and gunpowder stung her nostrils. The medics were struggling to maintain a defensive position, their fear palpable. Emily realized that her role was evolving beyond medicine. She needed to provide structure and strategy to keep the team alive. Using her observational skills, she directed the medics to reorganize their defensive positions, pointing out cover spots and safe zones that she improvised from her surroundings. Jason, barely able to stand, looked at her with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Emily, how are you? You're just—" He couldn't find the words. Emily smiled faintly, though her eyes remained sharp, scanning for any movement that might indicate imminent danger. "We don't have time for doubts," she said, voice calm but firm. "We stabilize the injured, keep our heads down, and wait for an opportunity to move. Focus on what you can control?" She triaged the wounded further, prioritizing those whose survival depended on immediate care. One medic, barely conscious, had severe internal bleeding. Emily's hands worked swiftly, applying pressure and preparing a makeshift foreline, improvising with what little supplies she had. Every action demanded not only skill but nerves of steel, and she felt every second weigh heavily on her. Lives were literally in her hands. As minutes stretched like hours, Emily realized the severity of their situation. The enemy was persistent, and the medics could not hold their position indefinitely. She needed a plan not just to stabilize, but to create a path to safety. Her eyes scanned the terrain. A partially collapsed building nearby offered potential cover, and beyond it, a clearing where extraction helicopters might land. She relayed instructions to Jason and the medics, organizing them to move in synchronized bursts while she continued to administer aid. The medics looked at her differently now. Emily Carter, the civilian doctor who had arrived unarmed and inexperienced in combat, was rapidly becoming the anchor in a storm of chaos. Her calmness under fire, her precision, and her ability to think critically in a life-or-death scenario had instilled hope where panic had threatened to take hold. For Emily, every heartbeat was a reminder of the stakes, and she knew that the real test was yet to come. Emily Carter had never fired a weapon in her life. She had never trained for hand-to-hand combat or crouched under gunfire, calculating every movement while her pulse raced. And yet, as she crouched behind a pile of rubble with Jason and the wounded medics, she realized that survival depended not only on medicine but on strategy, observation, and an unshakable presence of mind. The enemy was closing in. Shadows moved between the ruins, their guns trained on her brother's unit. The medics, exhausted and injured, were losing their nerve. One of them, a young soldier barely older than Jason, began shaking uncontrollably as a bullet whizzed past. Emily stepped closer, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "Focus on your breathing," she instructed. Her voice was calm, almost surgical, slicing through the fear around her. "We stay alive by thinking, not panicking." Her training as a doctor had prepared her for crises, but this was unlike anything she had ever faced. In the operating room, lives depended on precision, timing, and cool-headed decisions. Here, the same principles applied, but the variables had multiplied. Every shadow could be an enemy, every sound a threat. One wrong move could cost lives, and every second that passed put the medics and Jason at greater risk. Emily quickly assessed their situation. The enemy had them flanked, with multiple firing points. The medics were struggling to maintain a defensive perimeter, and their limited ammunition meant they couldn't hold out indefinitely. She realized that direct confrontation wasn't an option. They needed a plan that combined caution with opportunity. She began giving orders, improvising tactics based on observation. "Jason, lead the wounded to the far wall behind the rubble. Cover each other. Move quickly but quietly," she said. Her instructions were precise, leaving no room for confusion. She noticed a partially collapsed building nearby that offered potential cover, and a vantage point to observe enemy movements. Her eyes scanned the area, noting patterns in how the hostile forces were advancing. Emily's mind worked like a machine under pressure. She recognized a rhythm in the enemy's approach, short pauses between movements, a predictable arc in their patrol paths. It was enough to give the medics a chance to reposition. She guided them silently, signaling when to move and when to stay hidden. Every moment she spent caring for the wounded. She simultaneously calculated escape routes and opportunities to disrupt the ambush. Jason's eyes never left her. He had always admired her skill as a doctor, but now he saw a side of her he had never known, fearless, analytical, and decisive under fire. "Emily, how are you so calm?" he whispered. She gave him a small, grim smile. "Fear is normal, but we don't act on fear. We act on what we can control." Emily continued to stabilize the medics, applying bandages, controlling bleeding, and maintaining oxygen lines, all while keeping one eye on the enemy. She realized that their only hope lay in creating a distraction long enough to give them time to escape. Her surgical precision translated unexpectedly well to battlefield calculations. Steady hands, careful timing, and focus on a single task. Then she saw a sniper's rifle abandoned behind a barricade within reach. It was risky, but Emily knew that neutralizing a single threat could give them the advantage they needed. She didn't hesitate. Her mind, trained to perform delicate operations under pressure, now calculated the variables for a different kind of precision: speed, angle, and timing. The medics looked to her for guidance, placing their trust in a civilian doctor whose courage had far outstripped her lack of combat experience. Emily felt a surge of clarity. Everything she had learned in the hospital observation, steady hands, quick decisions, was coming together. She would act. Not for glory, not for recognition, but for the lives she had sworn to protect. In that moment, she was no longer just a doctor. She was the anchor of a team teetering on the edge of disaster, and she was ready to face the enemy head-on. Emily Carter's eyes locked on the abandoned sniper rifle lying half-hidden behind a crumbled wall. For a fleeting moment, the civilian doctor she had always been, the quiet, skilled healer of Ohio, flickered in her mind. But there was no time for hesitation. Lives were on the line. Her brother, Jason, and the medics who had fought so hard to survive were counting on her. She swallowed the fear knotting her stomach and took a steadying breath. The enemy soldier she had spotted moments ago was scanning the area, unaware that Emily was preparing to act. Her mind, trained to handle surgical emergencies with precision, immediately began calculating distance, angle, trajectory, and timing. In the operating room, a slip of a millimeter could mean death. Here, the stakes were no different. One wrong movement could cost the lives of the people she had come to save. She crept toward the rifle, her movements deliberate, each step measured to avoid attracting attention. Jason and the medics were crouched low, following her every motion with wide eyes. unsure what she intended but trusting her implicitly. "Emily, what are you doing?" Jason whispered, his voice trembling with fear and awe. She didn't answer. Words weren't necessary. Her focus was singular: neutralize the threat, buy her team precious seconds, and tip the odds in their favor. Emily positioned herself behind the cover, shoulder braced against the wall, and lifted the rifle. Her hands, which had once delicately sutured veins and arteries, now gripped cold metal with steady determination. She lined up her sight on the enemy soldier who had been keeping the medics pinned down. Sweat trickled down her temple, but her hands did not shake. She adjusted her breathing, letting her instincts guide her. Years of focusing on minute details in surgery had prepared her in an unexpected way. Under pressure, her mind could eliminate distractions and narrow to a single vital task. The soldier moved slightly, exposing more of his position. Emily calculated the angle, the distance, and the likely trajectory. The medics were holding their breath behind her, eyes wide, trusting in a civilian woman to do something they had been trained for years to accomplish. Emily felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on her shoulders, but it didn't paralyze her. It sharpened her. She exhaled slowly, squeezed the trigger, and the rifle discharged. Time seemed to stretch unnaturally, each second dragging with the tension of possibility. The bullet hit its mark perfectly, striking the enemy soldier who had threatened her brother's team. He collapsed, the immediate threat neutralized. The ambush faltered as other enemy forces momentarily hesitated, disoriented by the sudden, unexpected strike. Emily dropped the rifle and immediately turned back to the medics, her adrenaline spiking, ready to continue stabilizing the wounded. Jason blinked in disbelief, his voice hoarse as he whispered, "Emily, you just—" Words failed him. He could not articulate the shock, the awe, and the relief flooding through him. Emily merely nodded, her attention already on the team, checking injuries, and ensuring that everyone was still breathing. The momentary disruption had bought them crucial seconds. Emily directed the medics to move the most critically injured toward a partially collapsed building she had identified as potential cover. Every movement was coordinated, precise, and calculated, ensuring that no one exposed themselves unnecessarily. She continued to triage, apply bandages, and stabilize the severely wounded, all while maintaining vigilance over the enemy's movements. Her actions transformed the dynamic of the battlefield. A civilian doctor, someone who had never carried a weapon or faced combat, had shifted the balance. Emily had saved lives not through brute force or training, but through clarity, observation, and fearless execution under pressure. The team had a renewed sense of hope, a realization that their survival was still possible. As Emily worked, she felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Her hands, trained to heal, had now been instruments of protection. Her mind, trained to plan and execute under pressure, had calculated life and death outcomes with deadly precision. She realized in that instant that courage was not the absence of fear, it was action despite it. Emily Carter, the civilian doctor from Ohio, had become something extraordinary, the anchor in a storm, the steady hand that saved lives, and the hero who would change the course of that ambushed medic unit forever. The echo of gunfire still lingered in the air, mingling with the acrid scent of smoke and dust. Emily Carter didn't allow herself a moment to celebrate. The ambush had been temporarily disrupted, but danger was far from over. Her brother Jason and the remaining medics were still injured and exposed, and enemy forces could regroup at any moment. Survival depended on swift, precise action, and Emily was fully aware that she was now the de facto leader of this operation. "Everyone, move!" Emily commanded, her voice firm but calm. She directed the medics to carry stretchers with the most critically wounded, her eyes scanning for safe cover as they moved. Improvising on the spot, she identified a partially collapsed building nearby that offered relative protection from the enemy's line of sight. Dust kicked up around their boots as they sprinted in short bursts, staying low and careful with every step. Emily's hands were full, alternating between stabilizing wounded medics and guiding others. One soldier had a deep leg wound that required constant pressure to control bleeding. Another was in shock, trembling and disoriented. Her training, In emergency surgery was invaluable. She applied tourniquets, administered 4 fluids, and ensured oxygen supply, all while keeping watch on the surrounding battlefield. Every action was calculated, every movement intentional. One misstep could be fatal. Jason was beside her, doing his best to assist the others despite his own injuries. He glanced at Emily, his eyes a mixture of relief and awe. "I can't believe you're doing this," he said, voice strained. Emily gave him a faint smile but didn't let herself be distracted. "We don't have time for disbelief," she replied. "Focus, every second counts." Her voice carried authority not because she was trained for combat, but because she had proven herself under fire. The medics moved in coordinated bursts, following Emily's instructions as she guided them toward the building. She made sure each wounded soldier was secured on stretchers or carried safely, improvising splints and padding with whatever materials were available. She calculated every step, every movement, and every pause. Balancing speed with caution. As they approached the building, Emily noticed that the enemy was attempting to reorganize. Shadows flickered between ruins, weapons raised, but the delay, caused by her earlier shot, had given them a critical advantage. "Hurry! Inside now!" Emily shouted, directing the medics to a safer zone within the partially collapsed structure. She worked quickly to move the wounded, improvising additional cover with debris and sandbags to shield them from enemy fire. Emily didn't stop there. Using a radio she had managed to grab from one of the medics, she coordinated with a nearby command post. "This is Carter," she said. "We need immediate extraction. We have critically injured personnel at coordinates 47. 82. Priority evacuation now." Her voice was calm but urgent, the kind of authoritative tone that demanded attention even amidst chaos. Within minutes, she received confirmation that air support was en route. As the distant thrum of helicopter blades grew louder, Emily felt a surge of hope. The extraction point was within sight, and the wounded medics were stabilized enough to be moved. Emily organized the team to approach the landing zone in coordinated bursts, minimizing exposure. Every eye was on her, every movement followed her lead. She had become the lifeline, the anchor in the chaos. When the helicopters finally landed, Emily directed the medics to load the wounded efficiently. She ensured each patient was secured, that IVs remained in place, and that everyone maintained calm despite the roaring blades overhead. Jason looked at his sister, unable to speak, but his eyes said it all: gratitude, admiration, and awe at the courage she had shown. Emily breathed a quiet sigh of relief as the last medic was lifted into the helicopter. Her role was not yet over. She remained vigilant, scanning the area for any remaining threats, coordinating with pilots and ground forces to ensure a safe takeoff. Every action, every instruction was deliberate. She couldn't allow even a single mistake. As the helicopters rose into the sky, Emily felt an unfamiliar mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had saved lives, stabilized the wounded, and guided a team through a deadly ambush. A civilian doctor had become the guardian of a medic unit in a war zone. For Jason and the others, Emily was no longer just a sister or colleague. She was their hero, their anchor, and the reason they were alive. Emily Carter returned home to Ohio under a cloud of exhaustion and quiet relief. The once familiar streets, the suburban calm of her neighborhood, felt almost surreal after the chaos she had faced overseas. She walked through her front door, carrying nothing but her medical bag and the heavy weight of experience, and was greeted by the quiet hum of her apartment, the hum of normal life. Everything seemed ordinary again, yet nothing was the same. The world she had left behind, the controlled, predictable rhythms of the hospital, now felt simultaneously comforting and strangely insufficient. She had faced death, fear, and life-or-death decisions in a battlefield far removed from the calm, sanitized environment she had known, and yet she had survived. More importantly, she had saved lives. Jason and the medics had survived because of her quick thinking, courage, and precision. The reality of what she had accomplished slowly began to sink in. The recognition came swiftly. Military officials formally commended her bravery, awarding her a medal for extraordinary courage under fire. Photos and reports circulated within her family, friends, and hospital colleagues. But Emily's humility remained unshaken. She was deeply grateful for the recognition, yet she cared little for accolades. What mattered most to her were the lives she had saved, the relief in her brother's eyes, and the knowledge that a civilian doctor could, in a moment of crisis, make the difference between life and death. Emily spent the following days in quiet reflection, replaying the events in her mind. She remembered the smell of smoke, the roar of gunfire, and the faces of the medics stormed between fear and hope. She thought about the soldier she had neutralized with a single, perfect shot, and about the medics she had stabilized under impossible conditions. The weight of it all was heavy, yet she understood something profound. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is action despite fear. It is clarity of mind when chaos reigns. Jason was at her side, unable to contain his admiration. "I don't even know how to describe what you did, Emily," he said one evening, voice trembling. You weren't just a doctor, you were our anchor. You saved lives. You saved us." Emily gave a small smile, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I did what I had to do, Jason, that's all." Yet she knew the truth, her decisions, her calm under pressure. Her courage had made the impossible possible. Returning to her hospital, Emily noticed subtle changes in herself. Simple routines that once felt ordinary now carried a new weight of significance. Each patient, each decision, each life she touched carried a reminder of what she had experienced. She became more deliberate in her actions, more aware of the fragility of life, and more compassionate with those in her care. The battlefield had taught her lessons no classroom could provide. Emily also began sharing her experience with colleagues and trainees. She emphasized not only medical skill but mental fortitude, quick thinking, and adaptability under pressure. Her story inspired others, reminding them that heroism could emerge from ordinary individuals when circumstances demanded it. She became a symbol of courage, proving that one person, even without formal combat training, could rise to extraordinary challenges. Yet Emily remained grounded. She didn't seek fame or attention. Her satisfaction came quietly, in the knowledge that she had acted decisively when it mattered most. The medal on her wall was a reminder, not of personal glory, but of the lives entrusted to her hands and the responsibility she had carried. As she sat quietly one evening, reviewing photos of the team she had saved, Emily reflected on her journey. She had stepped into a world far beyond her ordinary life and emerged stronger, wiser, and forever changed. The civilian doctor from Ohio had become more than she ever imagined, an anchor, a hero, and a living testament to the power of courage, focus, and the will to act. And in that reflection, she found peace, knowing that in the darkest of moments, she had risen to meet the impossible. Life slowly returned to normal for Emily Carter, but normal had been forever altered. The small apartment in Ohio, the familiar streets, and the quiet hum of the hospital no longer felt mundane, they carried new meaning. Every patient she treated reminded her of the medics she had saved, the lives hanging in the balance in a distant conflict zone, and the thin line between ordinary life and extraordinary courage. Emily had crossed that line, and nothing would ever be the same again. Returning to the hospital, she found comfort in her routines, but with a renewed sense of purpose. Each surgery, each emergency case, each patient became a reminder of the responsibility she bore, not just as a doctor, but as someone who had experienced firsthand how fragile life could be. Colleagues noticed subtle changes in her demeanor. She moved with the same calm precision as before, but now there was a quiet intensity in her eyes, a depth that came from having faced death and emerged determined to make every second count. Emily also became an unexpected source of inspiration. Trainees and colleagues would ask about her experience overseas, and she would tell them what she had learned, emphasizing resilience, courage, and adaptability. "Skill can save lives," she would say, "but clarity under pressure and the courage to act, when the moment demands it, that is what makes the difference." Her story encouraged others to trust their instincts and rise to challenges they never thought they could face. Her relationship with Jason deepened. The bond they shared, already strong, had been forged in fire and fear. Jason often recounted their survival story to friends and colleagues, marveling at Emily's calm under fire, her decisive actions, and the courage that had saved his life. Yet, Emily remained humble, always redirecting credit to the team, emphasizing that survival had been a collective effort. She had acted, yes, but the bravery of her brother and the medics had also been crucial. Emily's experiences also inspired her to advocate for medical personnel in conflict zones. She partnered with humanitarian organizations to provide training, resources, and support to doctors and medics who faced dangerous situations similar to the one she had endured. Her lectures and workshops emphasized the importance of preparation, mental fortitude, and the ability to improvise in unpredictable circumstances. People were drawn to her not just for her expertise but for her authenticity. She had lived through the chaos and could guide others through it, despite all the accolades, recognition, and invitations to speak. Emily never sought personal glory. The medals she received hung quietly on her wall, silent reminders of the lives saved and the extraordinary circumstances she had faced. For her, the true reward was knowing that her actions had preserved life, alleviated suffering, and strengthened the courage of others. Emily also took moments of quiet reflection. She often sat by her apartment window, looking at the skyline and thinking about the battlefield, the medics, and the choices she had made. Fear had been present, yes, but it had never stopped her. She had learned that heroism was not about being fearless, it was about acting with precision, clarity, and courage despite fear. It was about rising to the occasion when others needed you most. In her heart, Emily knew she had changed forever. She had started as a civilian doctor, living a life defined by routine and predictability. She had crossed into chaos, faced danger head-on, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined. She had discovered that ordinary people are capable of extraordinary acts when confronted with the unimaginable. As she returned to her patients, her family, and her work, Emily carried with her a quiet confidence and unwavering purpose. She knew that life could demand more than anyone expected, but she also knew that ordinary individuals, guided by skill, courage, and compassion, could rise to meet those challenges. Emily Carter had lived through the impossible, and she had not only survived but transformed it into a life dedicated to saving and inspiring others. Her story became a testament. Courage is not reserved for soldiers alone. It can dwell in anyone willing to act when the moment demands it. Emily, the civilian doctor who had faced bullets and chaos, had proven that heroism exists wherever dedication, skill, and an unyielding heart converge. And in doing so, she had left a legacy far greater than any recognition, a legacy of hope, bravery, and the enduring power of human resilience.